You're the reason this family's broken, my brother snapped, his voice slicing through the living room like glass on tile. I didn't flinch. I'd heard worse. But it was the next line that really hit me. My dad, seated on his usual spot on the recliner, added without looking up from his phone, "Things were better before you came back." He said it flatly, like stating a weather report. I didn't respond. I just stood there for a beat, letting the silence hang thick in the air, then grabbed my keys and walked out. I'm Evan. I'm 32. And I made the mistake of thinking time could heal something that was never really whole to begin with. 3 months earlier, I'd moved back home. Not because I wanted to, because I needed to. I had spent the last 10 years in Seattle, building a career in digital marketing, living in a tiny apartment with my dog, saving what I could. But then life happened fast. I lost my job during a round of sudden layoffs, then got hit by medical bills after a freak accident tore my ACL. I tried to hang on, but rent chewed through my savings faster than I could job hunt. Eventually, with no other choice, I made the call I had promised myself I never would. "Hey, Dad. I might need to come home for a bit." He paused before answering. "Well, it's not ideal, Evan, but we'll make it work. Don't expect much." That should have told me everything. When I arrived back at the house, my childhood home, nothing had changed. Same peeling wallpaper in the hallway. Same beige couch that had survived 2 dogs, 1 divorce, and 1 too many Thanksgiving fights. My younger brother Jake had never left. He was 29, technically employed by a consulting firm, which really meant he worked from the kitchen table on a laptop that was always open to fantasy football. He still lived at home, still had his laundry done by our stepmom, and still called me Seattle like it was a slur. The first few weeks were awkward. I kept to myself, applied to jobs, helped with chores, tried to make the best of things. But I could feel it, the tension. Like I disrupted a delicate balance I didn't even know existed. Every time I sat at the dinner table, Jake would find some way to mock me. So, any luck being relevant again, he'd say between mouthfuls of Mom's meatloaf. Dad never said much. Just sipped his drink, watched the game, and let Jake run his mouth. Then came the incident with the truck. Jake had borrowed my car one morning without asking. When I got outside to leave for an interview, it was gone. I called him. No answer. I called again. Finally, he picked up, sounding annoyed. "Relax, I'm picking up some stuff. I'll be back soon. You didn't even ask. I have an interview." "Then take Dad's truck," he said, and hung up. So I did. I grabbed Dad's keys and left. I made it to the interview 10 minutes late, with mud splattered up the sides of my pants from wading through our gravel driveway after last night's rain. The whole thing was a disaster. I didn't get the job. When I came back, Dad was waiting. "You took my truck without permission," he said coldly. I didn't have a choice. "Jake took my car. That doesn't give you the right to help yourself to mine." I blinked. "Are you serious right now?" "Dead serious. This house runs on respect, Evan. And you haven't earned much of that lately." That night, I started sleeping with the door locked. I wasn't scared, just tired. Tired of how quickly the house had turned against me. The worst part wasn't the words. It was the way they all looked at me like I didn't belong. Like I was the outsider, the burden, the mess that walked back in and ruined their carefully choreographed delusion of harmony. My stepmom, Brenda, avoided me completely. Jake had graduated from passive digs to open jabs. Dad? He had made up his mind from the beginning. This was a temporary nuisance, not a reunion. One night over dinner, Jake said, "Funny how you think you're better than us, and yet here you are, sleeping under our roof like a stray cat." Brenda chuckled. Dad smirked. I stared down at my plate. "I've never said I was better." "You didn't have to," Jake replied. "You just walk around with that face like we're all beneath you." I pushed my chair back and stood. "Thanks for dinner," I muttered. "Oh, look, the prodigal son is excusing himself," Jake mocked. What a shock. I didn't say anything. I just walked up the stairs. I thought I was getting good at ignoring it. But the silence that followed me up that night felt heavier than usual. The breaking point came a few days later. It was a Sunday afternoon. I'd just finished a virtual interview for a remote job that actually seemed promising. I came downstairs to grab a soda. Jake and Dad were watching football in the living room, shouting at the screen. I didn't plan to stay long. I grabbed a can from the fridge and turned to head back up when Jake blurted, "You know what's hilarious? You crashing back in here like we owe you something." I froze, turned slowly. Jake didn't even look at me. This house was finally peaceful. "Then you showed up." Dad added, still not looking away from the TV, "Things were better before you came back." And that was it. No yelling. No dramatic confrontation. Just a moment. A switch flipping. Something dull and familiar inside me finally giving way. I didn't defend myself. I didn't ask for an apology. I just nodded once, turned around, walked upstairs, and packed my bags. I left that night. The next morning, I blocked them all. Phone, email, even Jake's smug social media. I checked into a short-term rental with what little cash I had left and started figuring things out again. A friend from Seattle lent me some money. Another connected me to a job lead. I wasn't sure what came next, but I knew who wouldn't be in it. And then, around noon, my phone buzzed. 22 missed calls. All from numbers I'd either blocked or didn't recognize. One voicemail had come through somehow. I stared at the notification. Listened. That's when everything changed. The voicemail was from Brenda. Of all people, I never expected her voice to be the one breaking through the digital wall I just finished building. She never used to call me. We barely spoke when I lived there, unless she needed something like the Wi-Fi password or for me to take the trash out when Jake forgot. But this voicemail, her voice was shaky, brittle in a way I didn't recognize. Evan, I know you don't want to hear from any of us right now, but please, you need to call your dad. It's serious. He's in the hospital. He collapsed this morning. Just, please. That was it. No details. No explanation. Just a 10-second call that hit like a punch to the chest. I sat there on the edge of the guest bed, holding my phone like it might bite me. The first thought that came to mind wasn't panic, it was confusion. Why was she the one calling me? Why not Jake? And then, darker still, why was I even surprised? Brenda had always been the cleaner. The one who made messes disappear quietly. And apparently, that included trying to scrub me back in now that things had gone south. I didn't call back. Not right away. I just stared out the window for a long time, listening to the wind push the tree branches against the pane like fingers trying to tap their way in. My gut was a mess of things I didn't want to feel: resentment, guilt, fear, the twisted tug of old habits screaming go back. Be the good son. Be useful again. But I didn't move. Instead, I opened my laptop. I still had access to the shared family calendar on Google, something I'd set up years ago when I was trying to help them all stay organized. Brenda never used it. Dad barely looked at it. Jake had once changed my birthday reminder to Crybaby Evan Day, but I checked it anyway. And there it was. A meeting. Scheduled for that morning. Title: Trust Meeting. 10 a.m. Dad, Jake, Evan. I stared at it like it might rearrange itself. I hadn't been told anything about a meeting. My name was just slapped on like an afterthought. Was this some kind of trap? Or worse, a performance I was never meant to attend? My phone buzzed again. A new number. I didn't answer. Then a text came through. I know things were tense, but Dad said you should be there. Please. No name. Just that. My brain said Jake. My gut said maybe not. The language was too soft. Too careful. I couldn't sit still anymore. I grabbed my coat, shoved my laptop into my backpack, and booked a rideshare to the hospital. Every second of that ride, my head was a war zone. I kept trying to piece it together. Was this guilt? Manipulation? A genuine emergency? And if Dad really was in the hospital, what would I even say to him? When I got there, the receptionist directed me to the cardiac ward. My knees felt weird walking through those halls, like they weren't quite bending right. The last time I'd been in a hospital was when my grandfather died. I'd held his hand while my dad sat in the hallway on the phone with someone from work. Room 311. I knocked once and pushed the door open. Dad was awake. His face looked paler than I remembered. Older. He had tubes in his arms, and a beeping monitor behind him filled the silence I couldn't. Jake was there too, sitting beside the bed, slouched in the chair like he was just killing time waiting for a haircut. The second he saw me, he stood up. "You actually came," he muttered. I didn't answer. I looked at Dad. He didn't look surprised. Just tired. "You gonna sit? Or just stand there like a ghost?" he asked. Still sharp. Still Dad. I took the chair by the window. Jake leaned back against the wall, arms crossed. Brenda wasn't there. "So," I said quietly, "you okay?" Dad let out a huff. Heart rhythm was off. "Doctor said it was stress. They've got me on something now. Says I gotta slow down. Do you need anything?" I asked. He turned to look at me fully for the first time since I walked in. "Yeah," he said. "I need you to stop acting like a stranger." I blinked. "Look," he continued, "I know things got messy. We all said stuff we shouldn't have. But you storming off like that? Blocking everyone? That's not how family handles things." I almost laughed. Not because it was funny, but because that's not how family handles things with such a stunning line coming from him. I opened my mouth, then closed it, then finally said, "You're serious? After everything?" Dad just stared at me. Jake stepped forward, arms still crossed. "This isn't the time, man." "No," I said, standing. "It's exactly the time. Because I wasn't the one who started this. I came home because I needed help. And instead, I was treated like a parasite. Like a burden. You mocked me. He ignored me. Brenda pretended I didn't exist. And now, because he has a hospital bracelet, I'm supposed to forget all of that." Jake's mouth opened, but I held up a hand. I was humiliated every single day in that house. I lost my job, my apartment, everything. And I still tried to be respectful. I tried to stay quiet, keep the peace. But apparently, being quiet just makes me an easier target. Dad looked like he wanted to say something. But I wasn't done. "You all treated me like I was the problem. When the truth is, I walked into a family that had already decided I didn't belong." Jake scoffed. "You done?" I turned to him. "No, not yet." Because I saw that meeting on the calendar. The trust meeting. I wasn't invited, was I? You put my name on it like a prop. What was it even about? Silence. Then Dad muttered, "The house." My stomach dropped. "What about it?" Jake shifted his weight. "It's going to me. Eventually. That's what we were discussing." I stared at them. "Wait, you were planning the estate? And didn't even tell me?" Dad sighed. "It's complicated." "No," I snapped. "It's not. You just didn't want me there." Another long pause. "I told them you wouldn't care," Jake added, almost proudly. And right then, I realized something. They'd already written me out. Not just of the house, but of the family plan. They'd circled the wagons, and I was left outside, holding a bag of goodwill that never meant a thing. I took a breath. "Okay," I said, voice calm. "Good to know." And just like that, I turned and walked out of the room. I didn't look back, but I had a plan. Because they were right about one thing, I had been quiet. Too quiet. By the time I reached the hospital parking lot, my hands were shaking, but not from grief. From clarity. The kind that comes when you finally stop hoping someone will change and start planning how to change everything around them. I sat in the back seat of my rideshare and opened the cloud drive on my phone. 10 years ago, I'd been the only one in the family who understood tech well enough to set up and digitize Dad's financial records. He'd handed me a battered box of folders and a coffee-stained notepad, and I spent an entire week scanning every deed, every insurance policy, every will draft, and every utility account into neatly labeled folders. "So you can stop losing things," I'd joked back then. He laughed and said, "That's why you'll handle all this stuff when I'm gone." He had meant it then. But things change. People forget what you've done when it's no longer convenient to remember. I opened the house and legal folder. There it was, a scanned copy of the original deed, dated 1996. Joint ownership, Dad and my mom, before she passed. Then a new transfer record from 2005, updated after the estate was consolidated into Dad's name. I remembered this because I'd driven him to the notary that day. He said he wanted it all squared away in case something happened. I'd been 20 back then. Jake had just flunked out of his second college attempt. And Brenda? She wasn't even legally married to Dad yet. But somehow, now, she and Jake were the ones having secret meetings about my childhood home. I scrolled down further. There was one document Jake definitely hadn't seen. The draft of the updated will I'd helped Dad prepare in 2020, during lockdown, when I was the only one checking in via Zoom every week, while everyone else was too busy waiting for things to blow over. And in that draft, in clean black text, it read, "Primary beneficiary of the estate, Evan Michael Ford." He never finalized it. The last line of the scanned note read, "To be reviewed and signed post-pandemic, April or May 2021. He never followed through. I don't know if he forgot or if Jake got in his ear. Maybe both. But the digital copy was still there, complete with the unsigned field. I had the email thread between us confirming I drafted it with a lawyer friend. I had everything. And now, I had something else, motivation. For the first time in months, I felt sharp again. I wasn't going to fight them for the house. I didn't want it. Not the physical space, not the memory-soaked walls, not the creaky stairs that heard more resentment than laughter. But I was done letting them treat me like a guest in a home I helped build. I had poured time, money, and tech skills into maintaining that place while Jake burned through his 20s playing business mogul with Dad's patience and Brenda's approval. I opened a blank document on my phone and started typing. Subject: Estate Review and Financial Misrepresentation. Request for legal clarification. I wasn't sending it to them. I was sending it to Dad's lawyer, the same one I referred years ago when Dad needed help refinancing. She and I had kept in touch. She knew the history. She had told me once, "Evan, if they ever try to push you out of your family's story, call me." I remember who did the heavy lifting. By the time I got back to my short-term rental, I had already emailed her. I attached the unsigned will, the calendar screenshot of the so-called trust meeting, and a brief timeline of how things had deteriorated since I returned. I didn't ask her to sue. I didn't demand the house. All I asked for was clarity. A formal inquiry into whether Jake had already attempted to shift any assets, whether Dad had changed anything without due process, whether anything being planned could be legally contested, or, at the very least, illuminated. 2 hours later, I got her reply. "You were wise to act now. I'll begin the review this week. Do not alert them yet. If anything has moved behind your back, we'll know soon." I stared at that last line for a long time. If anything has moved behind your back, I had a feeling it had. 3 days passed. I ignored the texts. The missed calls slowed, but they never fully stopped. Jake left me a voicemail at one point, just 10 seconds long. "You've made your point. Can you stop acting like a victim now?" I didn't respond, but I did start pulling every financial receipt I could find from the last 12 years. Because here's the thing. When your family forgets who helped them, they assume they're not indebted to you. But I kept receipts. Literal ones. The year Dad needed a new furnace, I paid half and never asked to be repaid. The time Jake's business accidentally charged $3,200 to my Amex before tanking, I covered it because Brenda said he was in a rough spot. And even the landscaping they bragged about to guests, those hedges and that retaining wall, I Venmo'd the contractor and covered the permit fee myself. It added up, more than they realized. By the end of the week, I had forwarded everything to the lawyer. And that's when the real shift happened. Saturday morning, I woke up to a new voicemail, not from Jake or Brenda or even Dad. From my cousin Hannah, the only one in the family who had ever been neutral. Her voice was tense, almost rushed. "Evan, I don't know what you did or what's going on, but Jake's freaking out. I overheard him yelling at Brenda about the will and the lawyer being involved. He said something about everything falling apart if Evan pushes it. I didn't want to get in the middle, but you deserve to know they're hiding something." That was it. That was the confirmation. They hadn't just tried to cut me out. They had been moving quickly, probably while Dad was still sedated, trying to cement something they knew I might be able to contest. Something they thought I'd never catch in time. They were wrong. I took a deep breath after Hannah's message ended. A strange calm settled over me. Not relief, not vindication, just clarity. Everything I'd suspected had a foundation now. They weren't just petty. They were strategic. They didn't lash out because they were emotional. They did it because they wanted me gone, both emotionally and legally. But what they forgot, what so many people forget, is that the quiet one often sees everything and remembers everything. By Monday morning, Dad was discharged. I knew because Brenda posted one of those smiling "home at last" pictures on Facebook, with Dad holding a mug like he hadn't just tried to ghostwrite his eldest son out of the family legacy. The caption read, "Family is what gets you through the storm." I didn't like it. I didn't comment, but I took a screenshot, just in case. That same day, my lawyer, Ms. Alder, sent me a file labeled Preliminary Findings. Inside was a summary of everything she'd uncovered so far. 2 weeks prior to Dad's collapse, Jake had convinced him to begin a transfer of joint ownership of the house for tax efficiency. The paperwork was incomplete and signed and in legal limbo, but Jake had used that progress to start applying for an equity line of credit against the property through an old acquaintance who worked at a local credit union. The trust meeting I hadn't been invited to was meant to finalize new arrangements that would grant Jake financial power of attorney, essentially cutting me out of any future decisions, including those regarding Dad's care, property, or remaining investments. But the most damning part? Jake and Brenda had listed themselves as the two primary caregivers in a document they were preparing to submit to Dad's insurance provider, one that would grant them monthly stipends for managing care of a dependent elder. Dad was 61, hardly a helpless man, and they were already positioning him like a walking liability to cash in on. I forwarded the file to Dad's personal email. No message, no explanation, just facts. A day later, He texted me. Can we talk? Just you and me. We met at a small diner on the edge of town. I picked the place. Neutral ground. Somewhere quiet enough to talk, but not so quiet he could try to rewrite history without being noticed. He looked tired when he arrived. A little thinner, more weathered than even the hospital photos had suggested. He slid into the booth across from me and folded his hands. I got your email. I didn't say anything. He let out a breath. You blindsided me. I raised an eyebrow. I blindsided you? He winced. Okay, maybe that's not fair. But it didn't have to go this way. You're right, I said. It didn't. You could have told me what was going on. You could have called that trust meeting something else and invited me. You could have asked why I left instead of assuming I was being dramatic. But you didn't. You let Jake and Brenda box me out like I was some stranger wandering in. Dad looked down at his hands. I didn't know Jake had started the transfer. I signed a couple of things thinking it was just housekeeping, refinancing, maybe simplifying the will. I didn't know he was applying for loans. He paused. And I sure didn't know about the insurance scam. That made me pause. So, you're saying he lied to you too? He nodded slowly. I'm not proud of it. I haven't been paying attention like I should have. I let Brenda handle the paperwork. I trusted Jake to talk to the lawyer. I thought, maybe if I just gave him something to manage, he'd finally grow up. I leaned back, arms crossed. He didn't. He grew entitled. There was silence between us for a long minute. Then Dad asked, what do you want, Evan? You going to take him to court? Me too. I shook my head. No, I don't want the house. I don't want to ruin you. I just want the truth out in the open. And I want it to stop. The rewriting. The sneaking. The way everyone acts like I don't count just because I moved away and made a life that didn't orbit around this town. Dad looked up at me. For the first time in years, his eyes didn't look defensive. They looked ashamed. You did everything right, he said quietly. You got out. You built something. And I let them make you feel like that was a betrayal. I didn't say anything. I'll fix it, he said. No, I replied. We fix it. Or not at all. That night, Dad called a full family meeting. In person. At the house. I almost didn't go. But part of me needed to see it through. Not for them, for me. When I walked in, Brenda was perched on the arm of the couch like she was posing for a reality show confessional. Jake was already pacing, clearly fuming. He didn't even look at me. Dad stood at the center of the living room. When I arrived, he nodded once and spoke before anyone else could. We're changing some things, he said. Jake scoffed. What is this? A lecture? No, Dad said firmly. It's a reckoning. Brenda rolled her eyes. Oh, please. I've reviewed the documents, Dad continued, ignoring her. I know what you both tried to do. The backdoor transfer. The applications. The lies. And Evan has every right to be furious. I'm furious. You're siding with him? Jake snapped. I'm siding with the truth, Dad shot back. The room went dead quiet. Brenda opened her mouth to argue, but Dad raised a hand. Enough. You two took advantage of my name, my health, and my trust. Starting now, I'm revoking your financial access to the house. No more credit applications. No loans. Nothing without my oversight. And the power of attorney you pushed for? Shredded. Brenda stood. You can't just cut us out. I can't, Dad said. And I will. Then he turned to me. I'm amending the will. This time for real. Evan, I want you listed as executor. You're the only one I trust to handle this when I'm gone. Jake stormed out. Brenda followed, muttering something under her breath. I didn't celebrate. I didn't smirk. I just stood there, the weight of a decade's worth of rejection finally lifting. It didn't make everything okay, but it made something right. A week later, I moved back to Seattle. New apartment. New job. Clean break. I still talk to Dad. Sometimes even Brenda. Jake? Not once. And I'm okay with that. Because some stories don't need a reunion arc. Some stories need closure. And I finally had mine.